Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the class. We are doing the chapter Democratic Resurgence, and under this chapter, we were discussing the Proclamation of Emergency, and on the night of 25th June 1975, we have seen in what manner this emergency was declared by Mrs. Gandhi. She simply recommended the imposition of emergency to President Fakhruddin Ali Ahmed, and the President issued the proclamation immediately, and the cabinet was informed about it at a special meeting which was held on 26th of June at 6 a.m. So without consulting or without this meeting of cabinet, it was decided by the Prime Minister single-handedly. And we have also seen how after midnight the electricity to all the major newspaper offices were disconnected, so that things can be hidden, है ना, कि इमरजेंसी डिक्लेयर हो गया, इस तरह का पब्लिश नहीं हो, और मॉर्निंग में ही अर्ली मॉर्निंग में अपोजिशन लीडर्स को अरेस्ट भी कर लिया जाता है. सो नाउ वी विल फोकस ऑन दिस. what were the consequences of this emergency? So what was the consequence? The first is and the most important, as we have seen at this time, what was the situation of the country, that so many protests were taking place, strikes were going on, everything, we can say political unrest was there. But with the declaration of emergency, everything, all the agitation came to an abrupt end. Everything stopped. A strike was banned now, and opposition leaders were put in jail, and we see that during this period this government used the emergency powers, and the government suspended the freedom of the press also. And now the newspapers were not free. They were asked to get prior approval for all material which has to be published in the newspaper. So censorship came into effect. And censorship means कि there is a lack of freedom of press. कोई भी न्यूज़ प्रेस में पब्लिश होने के पहले गवर्नमेंट के अप्रूवल के बाद ही वो पब्लिश होगा, है ना. तो दिस वाज मोस्ट इम्पॉर्टेंट consequence, that agitation against government came to an abrupt end, है ना. abruptly जो है उसको बंद कर दिया गया. दूसरी चीज हुआ कि फ्रीडम ऑफ प्रेस ended, censorship was started. Then we see that this government also banned the organizations like RSS, Jamaat Islami, all these were banned, है ना. Then strikes and protests were also disallowed. And what we find that which is very much important, that under the provision of emergency, fundamental rights of citizens also stood suspended. So many various fundamental rights of citizens stood suspended, and in these fundamental rights it was the right to constitutional remedy, which you have studied, and that right also suspended, है ना, कि citizen जो है they can move to the court for restoring their fundamental right. That right to constitutional remedy was also suspended. So this is the most important, we can say, और जिसका बहुत ही far reaching impact हुआ citizens की life पे, है ना. Suspension of this fundamental rights. suspension of fundamental rights, including आर्टिकल 32। आर्टिकल 32 में जो कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल रेमेडी का राइट हमें मिला है वो भी छीन लिया गया। एंड नॉट ओनली दिस, ड्यूरिंग दिस पीरियड, ड्यूरिंग दिस इमरजेंसी जो कि 18 मंथ्स का था इमरजेंसी हमारा, इस पीरियड में extensive use of a preventive detention was done by the government. And as you know, you have studied about this preventive detention in class 11th also. People are arrested and detained only on apprehension, and they have not committed any offense, but only on apprehension that they may commit an offense, they were arrested. So this provision was used extensively during this period, and the purpose of government was to crush the opposition, and for that purpose only this preventive detention was used. And the most important thing was here that the arrested political workers, they could not challenge their arrest through habeas corpus petition. जो हिबस कार्पस का हमें राइट मिला हुआ है पेटिशन का आर्टिकल 32 के अंदर, जो कि हमने पहले देखा कि आर्टिकल 32 को सस्पेंड कर दिया गया। एक तरफ आर्टिकल 32 सस्पेंडेड हो गया, दूसरी तरफ प्रिवेंटिव डिटेंशन एक्सटेंसिवली यूज हो रहा है। तो प्रिवेंटिव डिटेंशन से बचने का एक यही तरीका होता है हिबस कार्पस, टू हैव द बॉडी। अगर कोर्ट ये पेटिशन ये रिट इशू कर देता है हिबस कार्पस का, तो फिर जो अथॉरिटीज़ हैं, पुलिस हैं, उनको प्रेजेंट करना होता है। बट नाउ द कोर्ट वॉज नॉट हैविंग दिस पावर टू रेट टू इशू दिस रेट ऑफ habeas corpus, है ना। So many cases were filed in the high courts and the Supreme Court on behalf of those people who were arrested under this preventive detention, but it was a claim of the government that no, it was not necessary to inform the arrested person of the reasons and grounds of their arrest. And during this period, during this situation, there were many high courts who gave judgment that even during this emergency, the courts could entertain a writ of habeas corpus, है ना। If a person is filing this filing for this issue of this habeas corpus writ, and if he wants to challenge his or her detention, then the court can issue this writ. But in 1976, what we find that the constitutional bench of Supreme Court overruled the high courts. This is the committed judiciary which was very much in which was demanded by the government. The government wanted that the judiciary should be committed, है ना। So this was executed during this period. The high courts are giving this judgment that the court can entertain, है ना, that court could entertain a writ of habeas corpus, but the Supreme Court is giving this verdict that no, the court cannot entertain this writ of habeas corpus, and it accepted the plea of the government that during the emergency, during the emergency, it was not even necessary for the government to inform the arrested persons of the reason and grounds of their arrest. This was accepted by the Supreme Court. So this was the situation, है ना। And this verdict of the Supreme Court was very much detrimental for the freedom of the citizens, because now the government was very much powerful to take away the rights of the citizens, the right to life, right to liberty. Everything can be taken away by the government according to this verdict of the Supreme Court. So this judgment closed the doors of judiciary for the citizens, and this is most controversial judgment of the Supreme Court. So we are considering consequences. So हमने 3 consequences देखा: suspension of fundamental rights including Article 32, then extensive use of extensive use of preventive detention, and then verdict of constitutional verdict of Constitutional Bench of Supreme Court. And what was the verdict? The verdict was that the court could not entertain the writ of this habeas corpus, and the government, it was not necessary for the government to inform the arrested person of the reason and ground of their arrest. So in this way this was done. And now we see और भी क्या consequences हुए. It's not कि everyone was really ready to accept whatever was the ruling of the government. No one was there to go against the orders of the government. There was resistance, there was dissent, and what we find that many political workers who were not arrested in the first wave, जैसा कि हमने देखा कि जैसे ही इमरजेंसी डाक में डिक्लेयर होता है मॉर्निंग में ही अपोजिशन के लीडर्स को अरेस्ट कर लिया जाता है. दैट वाज द फर्स्ट वेव. फर्स्ट वेव में जो अरेस्ट नहीं हुए, जो बच गए, दे वेंट अंडरग्राउंड, है ना. एंड नाउ दे स्टार्टेड ऑर्गेनाइजिंग प्रोटेस्ट अगेंस्ट द गवर्नमेंट अंडरग्राउंड. जब बिल्कुल अपने आप को उन्होंने छिपा लिया और वहीं से वो गवर्नमेंट के अगेंस्ट प्रोटेस्ट ऑर्गेनाइज कर रहे हैं. देन वी सी वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट डिसेंट्स, है ना. किस तरह से विरोध हो रहा है गवर्नमेंट के अगेंस्ट अभी भी है. गवर्नमेंट इज ऑल पावरफुल. इमरजेंसी इज डिक्लेयर्ड एंड ड्यूरिंग इमरजेंसी गवर्नमेंट बिकम्स वेरी मच पावरफुल. बट नाउ, इवन नाउ, people are dissenting. How? Some of the political workers went underground. Then we see some newspapers like Indian Express, Statesman, they protested against censorship. How they protested against censorship? They protested against censorship by leaving blank spaces in their newspaper where they were supposed to put some news item, but that news item has been censored by the government. So they left that place blank so that people could understand that because of censorship the news could not be published, है ना. इसी तरह से there were magazines like Seminars, Mainstream. These magazines they choose to close down rather than submit to censorship. They were not ready to accept censorship, so they closed down. And during this time many journalists were also arrested because they were writing against the emergency, which was completely against the democracy. And not only this, we see that many underground newsletters and leaflets were published to bypass censorship. censorship तो आपने लगाया क्या चीज़ पे? न्यूज़पेपर पे. तो बहुत सारे ऐसे न्यूज़ लेटर्स, लीफलेट्स अंडरग्राउंड में जो काम करने वाले लोग थे वो पब्लिश कर रहे थे, जिसमें कि वो कुछ भी छाप रहे थे. दैट कैन नॉट बी सेंसर्ड, है ना. और उन लोगों को ही अरेस्ट किया जा रहा था. और इसी समय एक और बहुत ही इम्पॉर्टेंट डेवलपमेंट होता है, दैट इज दिस द अवार्डीज, लाइक जो पद्म भूषण अवार्ड को पाने वाले हैं, जो पद्मश्री अवार्ड को पाने वाले, दे स्टार्टेड रिटर्निंग देयर अवार्ड्स इन प्रोटेस्ट अगेंस्ट द सस्पेंशन ऑफ डेमोक्रेसी. और इसमें दो नाम बहुत ही इंपॉर्टेंट है. एक है फणीश्वर नाथ रेणु हु वाज अवार्डेड विद पद्मश्री, and the next is Sivarama Karant who was awarded with Padma Bhushan. Both of them returned their award because they were completely against this suspension of democracy. So we can say that defiance was there, resistance was there, but it was not widespread. बहुत कम था, but था. ऐसा भी नहीं है कि बिल्कुल भी रेजिस्टेंस नहीं था, बट बहुत ही कम था. ओके. एंड नाउ ड्यूरिंग दिस पीरियड वी फाइंड दैट द पार्लियामेंट स्टार्टेड टू ब्रिंग many new changes in the constitution. First of all, as we have seen, this Allahabad High Court on 12th June 1975, the ruling of the Allahabad High Court was that the election of this Prime Minister Indira Gandhi was declared invalid, है ना, because he used government machinery. So now what was done by the parliament, that an amendment was made in the constitution, and through this amendment it was declared that elections of prime minister, president and vice president could not be challenged in the court. So this was misuse of power, simple misuse of power, है ना. And then comes the 42nd Amendment. It was also passed during the emergency, about which you have studied in class 11th also. It is called mini constitution because so many changes were occurred in the constitution by this 42nd Amendment, है ना. And through this 42nd Amendment, what we find that one of the most important provision of the amendment was increasing the duration of legislature, है ना. In our country the duration of legislature was 5 years, but now according to 42nd Amendment it was done to extended to 6 years. So this change was not only for the emergency period but was intended to be a permanent nature. मतलब हमेशा, अब हमेशा से जो लोकसभा है और जो हमारी राज्यों की विधानसभा है उसका जो ड्यूरेशन है वो 6 ईयर्स डिसाइड कर दिया गया. सो अब क्या होता, इमरजेंसी के बाद अगर मान लो इमरजेंसी ख़त्म हो गई तो उसके बाद भी इलेक्शंस जो है वो 1 साल के लिए पोस्टपोन हो सकता था, क्योंकि 1971 में लास्ट इलेक्शन हुआ था, ठीक है. अब 1971 के बाद 5 इयर्स पे इलेक्शन होना था 1976 में, लेकिन क्या हो गया, इस समय तो इमरजेंसी था और इमरजेंसी में ही 42nd अमेंडमेंट पास करके इसके टेन्यूर को भी बढ़ा दिया गया 1 साल. तो अब इफेक्टिवली ये मतलब हो गया कि इलेक्शंस जो है वो 1978 में होंगे. तो इस तरह से पार्लियामेंट ने अपने पावर को मिसयूज़ किया, हम कह सकते हैं. और यही फिर आगे अभी देखेंगे कैसे 42nd अमेंडमेंट के प्रोविजंस को अंडू किया गया बाय 44th अमेंडमेंट विच वाज ब्रॉट बाय जनता गवर्नमेंट. सो नाउ वी विल सी so the controversies regarding emergencies. First of all, the most important controversy was regarding the emergency. Proclamation of emergency. Was the emergency necessary? क्या emergency को लाना जरूरी था? So in our constitution this term is used, internal disturbance, in article 352, that on the basis of internal disturbance this emergency can be declared. And what we find that before 1975 emergency was never proclaimed on this basis of internal disturbance. And as we have seen during this 1970s the agitations were going on in many parts of the country, but was this reason enough for declaring emergency? जो प्रोटेस्ट चल रहे थे क्या वो इनफ था इमरजेंसी डिक्लेयर करने के लिए? गवर्नमेंट ने जो आर्ग्यूमेंट किया है वो ये है कि अपोजिशन पार्टी जो है वो रूलिंग पार्टी को, जो कि जिसको जनता ने इलेक्ट किया था, जनता ने जिसको मैंडेट दिया था, उस रूलिंग पार्टी को वो अपने पॉलिसीज़ के अकॉर्डिंगली काम नहीं करने दे रही थी. बिकॉज ऑफ प्रोटेस्ट एंड एजिटेशंस द गवर्नमेंट वॉज नॉट एबल to focus on the policies of on the policies which it was supposed to bring out for the welfare of the people, है ना. So there were so many agitations, protests and collective agitations, and these are not good for democracy. It is the claim of the government. ये बातें कौन कह रहा है? ये बातें गवर्नमेंट कह रही है ना. और इनका ये कहना, गवर्नमेंट का, जो इंदिरा गांधी के सपोर्टर्स थे उनका ये कहना था कि इन अ डेमोक्रेसी यू कैन नॉट कंटिन्यूसली हैव एक्स्ट्रा पार्लियामेंट्री पॉलिटिक्स, है ना. यू हैव द पार्लियामेंट इन डेमोक्रेसी का जो सबसे मजबूत इंस्टीट्यूशन है दैट इज पार्लियामेंट. सो यू एक्सप्रेस योर प्रोटेस्ट, यू एक्सप्रेस योर डिससेटिस्फैक्शन इन द पार्लियामेंट इटसेल्फ. व्हेन पार्लियामेंट इज अवेलेबल, व्हाई आर यू ऑप्टिंग फॉर एक्स्ट्रा पार्लियामेंट्री politics? Why are you targeting the government? So instead of going for extra parliamentary politics, you should target the government from within the parliament, है ना. And because of these agitations and protest and this collective action, what was happening, that instability was there in the country, and the complete focus of the administration was not on ensuring development and starting any welfare policies or anything like that, but the complete focus of the administration was to maintaining law and order because of agitation. So it was the claim of the government that the complete energy of the government and administration was diverted to maintenance of law and order. So it was the view of Indira Gandhi. She wrote a letter to Shah Commission. अभी हम देखेंगे क्या था शाह कमीशन. Indira Gandhi wrote a letter to Shah Commission in which she said that subversive forces were trying to obstruct the progressive programs of the government. The government was adopting progressive programs like Garibi Hatao program. We want to remove poverty, but these subversive, ये subvert करने वाले, हमें पीछे लाने वाले जो फोर्सेस हैं वो गवर्नमेंट को प्रोग्रेसिव पॉलिसीज, प्रोग्रेसिव प्रोग्राम्स को एग्जीक्यूट नहीं करने दे रहे हैं, बिकॉज दे वांट टू डिसलॉज दिस इंदिरा गांधी फ्रॉम पावर बाय यूजिंग एक्स्ट्रा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मीन्स. इस तरह से प्रोटेस्ट और धरना करके दे आर गोइंग फॉर एक्स्ट्रा कॉन्स्टिट्यूशनल मीन्स. दिस वाज द स्टेटमेंट. अब यहाँ पर एक शाह कमीशन, आपको ये दिस इज़ वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट टू नो क्या था शाह कमीशन. जब 1977 में इमरजेंसी ख़त्म हो जाती है और जनता पार्टी की गवर्नमेंट इस्टेब्लिश हो जाती है मई 1977 में, तो इन्होंने एक कमीशन अपॉइंट किया जिसके जो हेड थे वो JC शाह थे. He was a retired Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of India, and the purpose of setting up of this commission was to inquire into several aspects of allegation of abuse of authority, excesses and malpractices which was committed and action taken in the wake of emergency proclaimed on the 25th June 1975. जो 25 जून 1975 को जो इमरजेंसी प्रोक्लेम हुआ उस दौरान जो ये एलिगेशन लगे कि गवर्नमेंट ने अपने अथॉरिटी को मिसयूज़ किया, अब्यूज़ किया, एक्सेस पावर को यूज़ किया, माल प्रैक्टिसेस की, तो इन सब के बारे में इंक्वायरी करने के लिए ही ये कमेटी बनी थी. एंड कमीशन ने बहुत तरह के एविडेंस और बहुत सारे विटनेसेस को बुलाया टेस्टिमनीज के लिए, और इन सब में इंदिरा गांधी को भी बुलाया गया, है ना. सी appeared before the commission, क्योंकि बुलाया गया था तो वो आई तो, बट से रिफ्यूज टू आंसर एनी क्वेश्चन. सो ये शाह कमीशन आपके लिए बहुत इम्पॉर्टेंट है. ये कब बना था, किसने बनाया था और क्यों बना था. ओके, सो नाउ दिस was the opinion of the government. Because of these reasons, the government was not, because of agitation and protest and collective action, the government was not able to focus on the progressive policies and welfare policies, welfare programs, and its complete focus was diverted to maintaining of law and order. So it became necessary to impose this emergency, because the opposition was adopting unconstitutional, extra constitutional means extra parliamentary means to, and their main target was to dislodge the Prime Minister Mrs. Indira Gandhi. Okay, and now we see that there were some other parties like Communist Party of India. The Communist Party they supported Congress during the emergency, but the opinion of Communist Party was different. The Communist Party was of the opinion that there was an international conspiracy अगेंस्ट द यूनिटी ऑफ इंडिया. ये जो इमरजेंसी के पहले जो इतने सारे एजिटेशंस और प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे थे, उसके पीछे उनका कहना था कि इंटरनेशनल कॉन्स्पिरेसी है, और इनका ये मानना था कि इस तरह के सर्कमस्टेंस में जो रिस्ट्रिक्शंस लगाने पड़े एजिटेशन पे, जो इमरजेंसी प्रोक्लेम करना पड़ा, वो सही था. दैट वाज ट्रू, है ना. और इनको ये लगता था कि चूँकि इंदिरा गांधी सी पोर्ट्रेड हरसेल्फ, सी प्रोजेक्टेड हरसेल्फ एंड हर पार्टी एज सोशलिस्ट पार्टी, है ना. तो एंड CPI इज ऑल्सो कम्युनिस्ट, तो कम्युनिस्ट एंड सोशलिस्ट तो भाई भाई हैं. अब कम्युनिस्ट पार्टी जो थी उसको ये लगता था कि जो ये JP जो मूवमेंट कर रहे हैं, JP मूवमेंट, जयप्रकाश नारायण का जो मूवमेंट है, दैट इज अ मूवमेंट बाय द मिडिल क्लास, है ना. बिकॉज दीज मिडिल क्लास they were not given priority by the Indira Gandhi government because of its socialist nature. The main focus of the Indira Gandhi government was the poor people. So middle classes were not given appropriate, you can say, attention by Indira Gandhi government, and that is the reason. It is the opinion of CPI कि because of this this middle class जो है वो support कर रहा है JP को. That was the reason. And इसके पीछे इंटरनेशनल कॉन्स्पिरेसी भी उनको समझ में आ रही थी कि कुछ कम्युनिस्ट अब सोशलिस्ट जो है इंडिया का नेचर बनता जा रहा है, तो हो सकता है जो कैपिटलिस्ट फोर्सेस हैं यानी यूएस की तरफ से इनको सपोर्ट मिल रहा हो. इस तरह की बातें भी किया सीपीआई ने. हालांकि ये भी अपनी जगह सच है कि जब इमरजेंसी खत्म हो गई तब सीपीआई को ये महसूस हुआ, सीपीआई फेल्ट दैट व्हाटएवर इट असेस्ड वाज अ मिस्टेक and it was completely an error to support Congress for this proclamation of emergency and whatever the government did during the emergency. And on the other hand, these are the opinion of government and CPI who were backing this emergency. And now we see the opinion of the protesters, the opposition. Now we see that our politics had a history of popular struggle. We all know, and before independence we were doing all these popular struggle, and JP and other oppositional leaders, they were of the opinion that in a democracy people had the right to publicly protest against the government. If people feel that the policy of the government is not in favor of them, they had the right to publicly protest. And the protest which was going on in Bihar and Gujarat, that was totally non-violent. And the people, the workers, the leaders who were arrested by the government, actually they were never tried for any anti-national activity. They were not engaged in any anti-national activity. And no cases were registered against all these detainees. बिकॉज अगर वो कुछ एंटी नेशनल कर रहे होते तो उन पर कुछ चार्ज लगते. दे वर नॉट डूइंग एनीथिंग लाइक दैट, है ना. और जो सिचुएशन प्रिवेल कर रहा था, कहा जा रहा है कि हाँ बहुत सारे प्रोटेस्ट हो रहे थे, एजिटेशन हो रहे थे, स्ट्राइक्स हो रहे थे, कलेक्टिव एक्शंस हो रहे थे. तो इन सब सिचुएशन से कोप अप करने के लिए हमारी होम मिनिस्ट्री के पास बहुत सारे पावर्स हैं, है ना. द होम मिनिस्ट्री हैज़ द पावर, इट हैज़ द रिस्पॉन्सिबिलिटी ऑफ मॉनिटरिंग द इंटरनल सिचुएशन ऑफ द कंट्री. And in order to improve the law and order situation, it can use its power, है ना. Sometimes yes, it is agreed by the opposition party that in some agitation there was the agitators crossed the limit, है ना. But still the government had enough routine powers to deal with it. Why there was need to go for emergency? Why there was need to suspend democratic functioning and use of draconian measures like the emergency? For that there was no need of proclamation of emergency. Government had enough routine powers to deal the situation. And the most important thing is whatever was happening in the country, actually that was not a threat to the unity of the country, that was not a threat to the integrity of the country, but actually the protest and the strike were threat to the ruling party. It was a threat to the Prime Minister herself. So Indira Gandhi misused this constitutional provision not for the country but to save her personal power. That is the most important point. Okay, and now we will see what happened during emergency. Emergency के time में क्या होता है? What we see that implementation of emergency was very contentious issue, है ना. And government misused its emergency power. There were excesses and abuse of authority. These are all allegations against government. These are all very highly controversial issues, है ना. And government it was the claim of the government that it wanted to use the emergency to bring law and order, है ना, to restore efficiency and to implement the pro-poor welfare program, which it was not able to implement because of the protest of the people. So for this purpose, the government announced a 20-point program, and declared that it want to implement this program. Through this program, by the implementation of this 20-point program, poverty will be removed, है ना. तो 1971 के इलेक्शन में जीतने के पीछे ही यही रीज़न था. एंड क्या व्हाट वी फाइंड दैट जब इमरजेंसी डिक्लेयर हुआ तो इनिशियल मंथ्स में जो अर्बन मिडिल क्लास थे वो खुश हुए, दे वर हैप्पी, क्योंकि उनको ये लगा कि ये जो एजिटेशन, प्रोटेस्ट, स्ट्राइक्स हो रहे थे वो आखिरकार ख़त्म हुआ बिकॉज ऑफ इमरजेंसी. सो दे वर हैप्पी, है ना. एंड दे फाउंड दैट डिसिप्लिन वॉज अगेन केम बैक एंड लाइफ वॉज नॉर्मल. बट the poor and rural people also, they were also like poor or rural people को देखे तो they were also expecting effective implementation of the welfare program like this 20-point program, है ना. So different section of society had different expectation from the emergency and also different viewpoint. And those who were criticizing this emergency, they pointed out that whatever promises were made by the government, they remained unfulfilled, and the main focus, or we can say the main purpose of the government was to divert attention from the excesses that were taking place. For that purpose, everything was done, and the way in which this preventive detention was used on such a large scale, as we have seen, so many people were detained, and we have data also like 676 opposition leaders were arrested using this preventive detention. And the Shah Commission, it was the estimation of the Shah Commission that nearly 1,11,000 people were arrested under preventive detention law. So not only this, censorship was adopted, and press, the freedom of press was also curtailed. And one more thing which is very important to know, that the Shah Commission report में ये भी mention किया गया है कि जो दिल्ली पावर सप्लाई कॉरपोरेशन के GM थे, जनरल मैनेजर, this general manager of Delhi Power Supply Corporation, he received verbal order from the office of the Lieutenant Governor of Delhi. दिल्ली के जो लेफ्टिनेंट गवर्नर होते हैं उन्होंने इनको वर्बल ऑर्डर दिया था जीएम को, दिल्ली पावर सप्लाई कॉरपोरेशन के, किस लिए? टू कट इलेक्ट्रिसिटी टू ऑल न्यूज़पेपर प्रेसेस एट 2 AM. ठीक है, 2 AM भाई, मिडनाइट के बाद, जो हमने पहले जिसके बारे में बात की है ना. तो 26 जून 1975 रात में इमरजेंसी डिक्लेयर किया गया. मिडनाइट के बाद क्या किया गया? 2 बजे लेफ्टिनेंट गवर्नर जो हैं दिल्ली के, वो जीएम को फ़ोन करते हैं, दिल्ली पावर सप्लाई कॉरपोरेशन के जीएम को कॉल करके वर्बली उनको कहते हैं पावर सप्लाई कट करने के लिए, है ना. और कब रीस्टोर हुआ इलेक्ट्रिसिटी? 2 से 3 दिन लग गए, जबकि जब तक में क्या हुआ, इस 2 से 3 दिन में सारा का सारा सेंसरशिप जो है वो काम करना स्टार्ट कर दिया. तो द मेन पर्पस वॉज दिस कि लोगों को न्यूज़ न जा सके, पब्लिकेशन ऑफ न्यूज़ को रोकना था. तो 2-3 दिन तक पावर कट रहा, तो न्यूज़पेपर छप ही नहीं सका, और उस बीच में सेंसरशिप लॉ जो था वो पूरी तरह से ऑपरेशन में आ गया. So this is all for today. We will continue with this in the next class.